Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us live for our online panel, A Path Out of Poverty, What Can Legislators and Grassroots Do? I'm Daniel Sanchez-Pinol. I'm an economist at the Texas Public Policy Foundation and will be the moderator for today's event. I want to start by pointing out that at least 1 in 10 Texans is currently enrolled in our safety net system. Economic shocks like the COVID-19 pandemic and inflation have affected low-income families the most. Therefore, more citizens require government assistance. Unfortunately, as past evidence shows, the vast majority of recipients will get trapped in the system and will not be able to escape from it. For example, the Texas Health and Human Services Commission reported 3.6 million beneficiaries just in SNAP. Transfers from these programs reach an all-time high, costing $615 million to taxpayers only in October of 2022. That number without considering administrative costs. If Texas continues with this course of action, we should expect more resources to be devoted to a safety net system that does not deliver its promises and prolongs recipients' dependency. On the national level, a similar picture emerged. $25 trillion adjusted for inflation has been spent since the war on poverty was announced in 1964, without being able to get poverty below the 10% floor. With that context in mind, I would like to welcome our 3 distinguished panelists. We have today the Honorable Candy Noble. She's a Texas State Representative of District 89 and was first elected in 2018. Representative Noble committee assignments for the 18th legislative session included the House of Committees on Human Services, Ways and Means, and Resolutions calendars. In 2019, Representative Noble was named an emerging leader by GOPAC. She was one of only 30 Republican state legislators from across the nation to earn this distinction that year. Representative Noble has a degree in education from Harding-Simmons University in Abilene and served on their board of trustees. Rachel Fulcher-Dawson is also joining our panel. She's the Associate Director of Dissemination and Policy at the University of Notre Dame, Wilson Sheehan Lab for Economic Opportunities. Rachel oversees the dissemination teams which focus on sharing our research results and information to everyone who can benefit from it, provides in the field researchers, policy makers, and funders. Before joining the Lab for Economic Opportunities team, Rachel consulted with nonprofit schools and state governments and worked for the federal government at the Department of Education on Capitol Hill. Rachel received her BA in Political Science from Marquette University, her MA in Public Policy and Management from the University of Maryland, and her PhD in Education Policy from Michigan State University. Finally, Randy Hicks is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Georgia Center for Opportunity. I should mention that the Georgia Center for Opportunity, along with TPPF and the Pelican Institute in Louisiana, is part of the Alliance for Opportunity, which is a multi-state project designed to advance the anti-poverty agenda. Under Hicks' leadership, Georgia Center for Opportunity has led successful statewide effort to improve access to quality education for low-income children, promote stronger families, boost adoption safety, and increase employment opportunities for ex-offenders and the chronically underemployed. Over the past decades, Hicks and the Georgia Center for Opportunity team have launched 12 community-based initiatives in Georgia that work to strengthen marriage and families at the local level. Randy earned his bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Southern California and a master's degree in theology from Biola University in Los Angeles. He and his wife, Marilyn, reside in Suwan, Georgia, with their 6 children. The panel is structured in the following way. We will start by addressing the problems of our safety net system. Then I would like to discuss different alternatives that can serve as inputs for future reforms. And finally, we can discuss what legislators and grassroots do in the incoming session. We will have a Q&A at the end, so I encourage the audience to ask any questions to our three panelists through our chat box. So in my opening remark, I describe some of the economic problems that our current safety net system faces. But these are just cold numbers. I would like to ask Randy, in your view, why do you think this is a pressing issue and why it matters?
Well, Danielle, I appreciate that question, because I think, like you said, sometimes we get lost in the numbers and we forget about the humanity behind this. And I tell this story. We have many we could tell, but I often tell the story of Shannon, who on a Friday afternoon was invited into her boss's office, where she received a promotion and a pay raise. That was a Friday afternoon. She left his office in tears of joy because of what that meant for her and what it meant for her family. She returned on Monday, though, also in tears, but to turn it all down. And the reason is she was going to lose thousands more in government assistance than she was going to gain in pay. Now, that problem is something that everybody on this call will be familiar with. That's called the benefits cliff or the welfare cliff. It's basically when someone is actually going to lose more in government assistance than they're going to gain in pay. And, you know, it's a common problem, but I think Shannon's tears tell us everything we need to know. If it was only about money, it would be a cold calculation. All it is sitting down, Shannon sitting down and determining what's going to bring in the most income into her home, the most money into her home to provide for her family. There'd be no tears, but there were tears on Friday because she was joyful. She had earned something in her workplace. The tears on Monday were tears of sorrow because what she had earned in terms of esteem, in terms of respect, in terms of accomplishment, was basically all set aside because she was going to put her family at risk. So I think it's always important to remember that there are people in these systems that are trying to figure out life. They're trying to figure out life for their children, trying to figure out life for themselves. So that's why this is important. It's because there are literally millions of Americans like Shannon who are to some degree being assisted by the organization. They're kept from destitution, but they're also being trapped a bit by a system that isn't necessarily living up to the original intent of the programs.
Right. Thank you for sharing that compelling story. So I would like to turn to Representative Noble. So in your experience as policymakers, what are the main challenges that our safety system face today?
So I just kind of want to give you a little background. I ran the food pantry clothes closet at my church as a volunteer for 17 years. And so I have a heart for hurting people. And I just want to give you that background because it's so vital and important to who I am. But what I've seen is that sometimes our assistance that we give as a government is very inferior to what charities give because it's one size fits all. And we have what should have been a Band-Aid to help somebody get on their feet and to do better and to achieve the Texas dream has become a tourniquet instead that's cut off their ability to do better for themselves. And nobody dreams of their children growing up and being on welfare. No one does. And aside from our children that are in the foster care system and our intellectually disabled adults, that is supposed to be the goal of all of these safety net systems, is to get people on their feet and let them live that American dream for themselves and for their children. And anything that we do that doesn't result in that goal is detrimental in the long run. And so it is, again, I agree with the cliff problem that we see that so often. We have a really big workforce shortage in Texas right now, and this is only adding to that shortage of people not wanting to lose benefits, and that ought not to ever keep somebody from doing better for themselves.
Right. Yeah, so I want to turn now to Rachel. I know that Leo has worked with the Padua program in Fort Worth. Can you walk us through how the program operates and what makes their approach so different?
Sure, thank you. So the Padua program really is about respecting the dignity of the individual and their work with their own family towards economic mobility, towards better lives. And so what the Padua program was designed by Catholic Charities Fort Worth, one of our partners. We're a research lab and we partner with providers across the country, and Catholic Charities Fort Worth was seeing not just more people coming to them each day, but also repeat clients. And for them, that felt like failure, not success, because yes, they could count the numbers and say, we're serving this many people every year or every month, but often it was the same people coming back to them. And so it didn't feel like what they were doing was mattering for the long term for these families. And so they designed this Padua program, a holistic case management program, and it really kind of has 5 parts. The first is a detailed assessment, like what are all the complex factors and elements of this family's life that need to be addressed for them to permanently move out of poverty and into thriving. The second is an actionable service plan. So here's their situation, but here's a plan for them to move towards self-sufficiency. The third component is a 2-person case management team with small caseloads, and that allows really for that individualized support and consistent support for the long run for this family to move through and work through the barriers that they're facing. The fourth is then that intensive strengths-based case management service. And then finally, strategic flexible financial resources. So what that means is the program allows the case manager to work with the family with some flexible funds that aren't necessarily tied to a specific government program, and allows them flexibility to address the need in a way that they might not be able to if they just kind of checked a box that they were eligible for a certain program. And so this program's been running now since 2016. They partnered with Leo right from the beginning to really study the impact. And we did this with the most rigorous research method possible, a randomized control trial that really allows us to say, if the people, the families going through Padua program are better off, it is because of the program, because there are people, other families just like them that didn't get the program that have different outcomes. And we're seeing, 25% increase in employment because of the Padua program. On average, people who start the program unemployed, 46% more likely to be employed because of the program. Participants who are unstably housed at the beginning of the program are more likely, 60% more likely to have stable housing. And then in terms of government programs, those who are stably housed at entry, so people who already have the housing piece figured out, are 16% less likely to use other government programs compared to their peers. And, I think it's worth noting that it's a program because it's intensive case management and low caseloads. One big concern often is, well, it must cost more, and it does. And it costs more because it's more intensive service, but it's also longer term. So the average client stays in the program about 17 months, so about 1.5 years, which is longer than most kind of individual programs might work with a client. So this is like help for the long run, which adds to the cost. But we're seeing that for participants who, for example, were unemployed when they enrolled, it takes only about 4.5 years for their earnings to then surpass the cost of the program. So yes, it's more expensive up front than if we just silo individual programs and help serve families that way. But in the long run, not only are the families better off, but it's cost beneficial to the system.
Well, I'm glad to hear that those positive outcomes from the PADWA program. So I would like to turn to Randy. Randy, what do you think the role of the community should be in poverty alleviation? What initiative does the CGO promote?
Yeah. So first, I think what Rachel just described is what the community can do. That's exactly the kind of thing that communities can do. Remember, it's in homes, neighborhoods, and communities that lives are formed. And when things go badly for someone, it's where their lives will also be transformed. It's always going to be in relationship. The case management part that Rachel just described is so important because that's really a person working with a person. It's a relationship developing where someone knows someone and can lead them through the process of getting on their feet and doing better. So we believe what happens in the community is most important. And in fact, so we do work at GCO, both at the public policy level and at the community level. At the public policy level, the way we think of every public policy is it facilitating the kind of work or getting in the way of the kind of work that Rachel's doing or that Catholic Charities of Fort Worth was doing. That's what we wanted to, that's what we want to do when it comes to public policy. But we're working with groups on the ground that are working very directly with people who are returning from prison, re-entering society, reintegrating, which is an important way to think of it. Rather than just re-entry, it's reintegrating into society. So we work with here in Atlanta, a group called City of Refuge, work with another organization called Every Woman Works. All of them are very personal, very intensive along the lines of what Rachel just described, and really focus on helping people get on their feet, become more successful, feel like they have a sense of purpose and belonging, which is something we all crave and we're all wired for, I believe. So I think the community is everything. And again, as we think about public policies, as we think about the safety net system, I think we've always got to be thinking about what is it that we can do to encourage and foster solutions at the community level.
Right. Well, thank you, Randy, for that. So Representative Noble, you were instrumental in passing CB 1138. Can you please explain what was the objective of this bill and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
So I'm really proud of something that Texas does ongoing with our state programs, and that is we put them under sunset review, which means they kind of get audited. Unfortunately, we never sunset review these monies that we pull down from Washington for these safety net programs to see, are they doing their job? Are they are they having the outcomes that we anticipated? Are we burning a bunch of money in government overhead and red tape? So that was the purpose of the bill. I'm really proud of it. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten the results from the study yet from the Legislative Budget Board, and we anticipate getting that any day now. But we hope to see that that we're doing a really good job in some areas, but I anticipate that we're not doing a really good job in other areas. And so that will allow us a 30,000-foot view on seeing where we need to pivot and if the programs are necessary, needed, if they're doing the job that they were designed to do, which is getting people on their feet. And if they're not, then why are we wasting that money? So that is, I'm really, really excited to have carried that bill. I think in the long run, it may be one of the most important bills that I've ever carried, because we need to understand how we're doing. If we never stop and look back to see if we're having the results that we anticipated, then how do we know how to change it going forward? So that's our plan.
Great, thank you for that answer. So I want to turn to Rachel. So we have analyzed what is happening in Texas, but with your research background, what other successful programs do you think it will work that have worked in other states and can be applied to Texas?
Sure. So, I mean, when we look across our programs, there's kind of a couple that have emerged that, we're a research lab that focuses on any kind of solution to ending poverty. And so we didn't set out with a certain kind of program in mind that we think, oh, these must be what work. We really are driven by what the providers are seeing and how they're solving on that. So we really rely on our innovative providers to tell us what they think will work, and then for us to test it and see, yes, it is working, but maybe not for every population. Maybe it needs to be targeted differently. And so in terms of the kind of commonalities, case management is for sure a commonality across programs. And so it may, sometimes that looks like Padua, which is like the full-blown version of intensive case management. But we've also seen contexts where case management coupled with a community college program. That one, actually, we tested a program also in Fort Worth that showed that case management really can help low-income students, first-generation students, navigate the things outside of the academic setting that impact their academic success. And we attribute that also, the research shows that that was also because of the case management. There's also programs we've looked at in the housing space that have a case management component. And, I think that gets to, I know Randy mentioned this as well, that, programs that facilitate some sort of human connection and invest in that human connection through case management seem to have the longer term successes that we would all want to see, where it's not just addressing an individual issue, it's not just being eligible for a specific program, it's really having somebody walk alongside you, because poverty is complex and people in poverty are in survival mode, so they're not necessarily looking long term. So if they have somebody walking alongside them that can help them look long term, that allows for them to actually see themselves there as well, and then have support to get there. So case management, another area we're really seeing a lot of, we're doing a lot of research in, and we're starting to see a lot of impact, is in homelessness prevention. And so, of course, homelessness is a key factor in poverty. Sometimes it is the cause of other bad things happening in someone's life, and sometimes it happens because bad things have happened, right? So it can be both kind of cause and effect. But prevention programs seem to be a big area where the evidence points us. So this looks like we've done studies now in Chicago and in California. We have a couple underway in Texas as well that are looking at homelessness prevention. So this is like emergency assistance. So this is different, almost like the opposite side of the spectrum of case management, but it's, in crisis, what is the best way to stabilize an individual or family? And it's by stabilizing their housing. And what's interesting there is that one-time stabilization. The concern there is, okay, well, maybe we give people enough money to pay rent or pay their mortgage and prevent eviction for 1 month, but do they need it again the next month? And then that hasn't really helped them, and it's expensive to do that month to month. But actually, when you target this money correctly to people really at risk of homelessness, it prevents, both our Chicago study and our Santa Clara studies have shown this prevents it for up to a year or longer. And so finding those kinds of levers that stabilize families, even though it seems like in the short run, actually, because you're targeting it very well, is stabilizing them in the longer run. So case management and homelessness prevention are two that we're finding a lot of results that show us it works, and having it in different spots in the country helps too, so that we don't think, oh, that's just works in Chicago or it just works in Fort Worth. It helps to see it confirmed across different geographies and populations.
Right. So I want to ask a similar question to Randy. Do any reform in Georgia can be put in place in Texas as well?
Yeah, so at this point, we're working on driving reforms in Georgia that still need to be done. In that sense, we're very much like Texas. And of course, that's one of the reasons why the Texas Public Policy Foundation, the Pelican Institute, and GCO are working together, is because we recognize some reforms in the system that are needed. One thing that Georgia did a number of years ago that was helpful is they created Georgia Gateway, which brought in a number of safety net programs in a single kind of portal where eligibility could be evaluated across multiple programs at a single time. May seem like a minor thing, but again, so many of these programs operate in isolation and there's very little coordination. So that's a step in the right direction. But I'll tell you, Daniel, where we really want to go and what we think is super important is that we take more of the approach that Utah took at the end of the 90s. Essentially what they did is they took all their safety net programs, put them under a single office, so to speak, while at the same time merging workforce services. So what the whole mindset became different, the culture of the system changed. Person would come in and the first question they get is around the issue of employment and are they work capable, those kinds of things. And then safety net programs are viewed as support for work. Utah's the only state that has it. They're also the only state that could do it. Right now, you can't even do that. So we're actually working with some leaders at the congressional level to give states the flexibility, not require that they bring those programs together, give states the flexibility to do it. And another reason why that's so important, it's not just because it's bringing work into the mix. It's not just because it's being more efficient. It's because it also allows for the thing Rachel was just talking about, which we all know is very important, and that is case management. Right now, case management is virtually impossible in safety net programs because a safety net worker is focused on a single program or may get access and be able to look at another program. But you really want somebody to be able to take a holistic approach to caring for the poor. So we like the fact that some of our programs in Georgia are now in this single portal from an eligibility standpoint. That makes things more efficient and a tad easier for the recipient. But the goal here is not efficiency as an end. The goal is efficiency to a greater end. And the greater end is people being able to get on their feet and families doing better and achieving dreams that they want to achieve.
All right. Thank you, Randy. So to conclude, I would like to ask Representative Noble, what reforms should the legislature pursue in the incoming session?
So it's my dream, of course, that our safety net programs would result in jobs, not hinder jobs. And there's a lot we can do. I've been really excited to hear the ideas that the other two panelists have presented today. And there are definitely things that we can learn and implement. I don't have any bills that I'm working on currently. I was still waiting for the safety net study bill to come out. I mean, the results of that study to come out in order to pivot. But I am really excited about the opportunities to change the way we do things in Texas and the way that we look at these safety net programs in order to help people to actually get on their feet and actually dream that we all have to do better for ourselves. So we definitely have what we call at our house opportunities for excellence in the state of Texas when it comes to our safety net programs.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of questions from the Q&A. This is the first one. What are some ways we can objectively measure whether people are achieving self-sufficiency? How will we know that these reforms discussed today are working? Who will, I think maybe Rachel can answer that question.
Yeah, so the first question about self-sufficiency, what I can tell you, because we've talked mostly about Padua, is the way that Catholic Charities Fort Worth has approached this question. And so they have what they call opportunity or out of poverty benchmarks. So this is essentially means when you have achieved these, you should be self-sufficient. The first one is achieving a living wage that's appropriate for their family size. The second one is reducing participation in transfer programs, so the government assistance programs. The third is decreasing debt. And the fourth is meeting their individualized targeted savings goals. So, of course, fundamental to PADGA is that it's individualized. So this is going to look a little different for each family that they encounter. But across those four targets, that's how they define someone being out of poverty or being self-sufficient, and thus the PADGA program working for them. I think the second question was, how do we measure? And I will give the researcher answer, which is partner with Leo, because, really, I mean, and that's a little glib, but really the point being, if we want to know what works, we have to measure it, but also we have to understand, we have to isolate that it's the program that's working for them. It's not because all the participants in a program happen to already be employed, and so that program works really well if you're employed, but maybe it doesn't work so great if you're not employed. So we need to be able to isolate like who it works really well for and how it works for them, because some programs may work great for, like the PADGA program has different kinds of effects for people who start the program with housing instability versus people who start with that are unemployed, right? And so partnering with research, or it can be government evaluation, things like that. We like the most rigorous research because we feel like that gives us definitive answers, and then people can't kind of poke holes at it and say, well, you did that the wrong way, or you didn't isolate the effect, or whatever it is. And so I think that's the way we know that programs work, is by really measuring their outcomes, not just saying we served 50 people, but we don't know, are 50 people better off because they were served.
Yeah. If I can follow up on that a little bit, I think what Rachel just said is very important. Look, what we don't want to do is simply measure, one of the mistakes, and I know this is just reality, one of the mistakes we've made in the past is when we ask about how well a department is doing, often they just talk about the number of people we served. Hey, we did our job last year. We served 150,000 people, and the year before was 145,000 people. That's not a measure of success. It's just a measure of something that's happening. And similarly, we can't measure success simply by reducing welfare rolls, right? If that's success, you can kick people off and let them try to fend for themselves and figure out how this is going to work. That's not success either. So it's along the lines of what Rachel just said. You've got to make sure that you're actually measuring at some level what's going on with people. One of the reasons, again, I'm going to say this a lot, I'm going to sound like a broken record. One of the reasons I like that one door model that I described that Utah uses is because it gives you better access to case management and better tracking capabilities of just how someone's doing. So it's just a better model at so many levels for how we ought to do this. I should also say this, one of the things that we found really interesting, coming out of COVID, no state recovered more quickly from a jobs perspective than Utah. Utah recovered so much faster than any other state. And we don't know this for sure. There's probably a correlation, not causation, but the correlation that we see is that they do safety net programs differently, and they deal with people differently, and they really promote work-related opportunities pretty extensively.
Great. So the last question. These ideas all sound great, but it's my understanding that a lot of these programs are federally funded. How much can the state really do without permission from DC?
Yeah, I know I can answer that. Maybe Representative Noble can as well, but essentially there is flexibility within many of the programs to structure things in such a way that you can improve efficiency and maybe weed out some of the waste that's going on. You can put certain requirements in place. You can do the kind of thing we're talking about where you're bringing a number of programs under one roof. Now, if we want to do it the absolute best way possible, ultimately, we're going to need waivers as well to create a program that works with greater flexibility and is more responsive to the needs of recipients. Remember, this all comes down to the recipients. This isn't about us. It's about what's good for the recipients. And to do it the way it needs to be done, you're going to have to get waivers to test things out, and the federal government will have to grant them.
Okay. Well, with that, I would like to thank all the panelists for all those valuable insights. To our audience, thank you for tuning in. If you would like to learn more about the topics we discussed today, please visit texaspolicy.com, where you will find more information. Thank again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.